Friends, we are back for second lecture, and as you know that we are talking about the fundamental theorem of algebra, one of the fundamental results in all of mathematics. And in our first lecture, we presented the first proof of Picard's what you call fundamental theorem of algebra by using Leibniz theorem. And now, as I have promised that I will present a proof not using complex analysis, much of complex analysis or much of calculus, but I will be using simply basic calculus and idea of complex numbers only. Yeah. So in this case, the first result from calculus that I shall recall is the extreme value theorem. What is extreme value theorem? That if you have this closed disk D0R, this one we denoted by this one. This is the disk with center 0 and radius r, and it is given by this, as you know. And now I consider a continuous function from this open disk. This is real valued. It is continuous on this disk. And then f is bounded because it is continuous, and this is on this compact set, so this is going to be bounded, and so it attains its minimum and maximum values on this. So basically this is extreme value theorem, that whenever a continuous function is defined in this way, then that function has to be bounded, and once it is bounded, it attains its minimum values as well as the maximum value on this disk. So in other words, you can find out two numbers or two points in this closed disk, we denoted by xm and xm, such that this inequality holds. So this is the value which bounds all the values of the function on this domain from above, and this is the value which bounds all the values of the function on this domain from below. So this is the minimum value, and this is the maximum value which is attained at the points xm and this x capital M. So this is all about extreme value theorem. So by extreme value theorem, that whenever you have a continuous function on this open disk, then it attains its maximum and minimum values, or we call them as the extreme values. That's why the name extreme value theorem. Okay. So now see, there is one simple observation, that if you have this complex number z equal x plus y iy, so I can treat it as the ordered pair of two real numbers x and y. And if we take this function xy going to px plus iy modulus of this, where p is the polynomial of degree n greater than or equal to 1, then you know that p is a continuous function, modulus is also a continuous function, so this whole thing is going to be a continuous function. That means this composition, being composition of two continuous functions, this is continuous. And by using this fact, or you can say a very straight observation, we can prove the following result. We call it as lemma because we have to use it immediately to prove our fundamental theorem of algebra. So if you have a polynomial, then there exists z0 in C at which modulus of p has the minimum value. That means this function attains its minimum value in C. Okay, so this is the lemma. How to prove it? If p is constant, it is a polynomial function, I am not putting any condition on the degree, so it may be constant, I mean the 0 degree polynomial, or it has the degree greater than or equal to 1. If it has 0 degree, that means it is constant, then this lemma holds trivially because this function attains its minimum value at every point of C. So there is no problem in this. So in particular, we shall use z0 to be equal to 0. That means if it attains everywhere, so we take the point at which the minimum value is attained, that is going to be 0. So for constant polynomial, it is okay, very trivial. Therefore, we assume that this polynomial is non-constant with a degree n greater than or equal to 1. Precisely, we can put this polynomial like this, as you know. Now see this estimate you have done already, that this mod pz is greater than equal to this expression. It is not necessary that we take this expression by utilizing this m and all that. We can simply consider this expression, which we denoted by 1, because modulus of pz tends to infinity as mod z tends to infinity. So that means when mod z is very large, then this thing is bounded below by any positive number. So because it tends to infinity. So using this estimate, we can immediately talk about this estimate, because mod pz tends to infinity. So therefore we can, and this is the minimum value, remember, because by this expression we can say that when z belongs to C, that this thing is greater than or equal to 0, satisfying that mod z is sufficiently large. Sufficiently large means when mod z is tending to infinity, then we know that this thing tends to infinity, so we can make it larger than any given positive number. So this is simple from the given estimate of these polynomials. Now we can define a function g from this closed disk into R. So this is real valued function of two variables defined like this. Just in the observation I explained that this is a continuous function, so that means g is going to be a continuous function, right? So g is a continuous function on this. Therefore by lemma, extreme value theorem. What is extreme value theorem? Extreme value theorem is this: once you have continuous function on this disk, then certainly we have this kind of inequality. That means we can find out xm and xm satisfying this inequality where the extreme values are attained. So the extreme values are attained at a certain point. Therefore one of the extreme values is minimum. Therefore there is a point in this at which the minimum value is attained. So that means this kind of expression is satisfied, because g 0 is going to be p0, right? But pz is greater than p0, and this, the minimum value of g is at x0 and y0. So that means this value is either equal to this or it is greater than equal to this, and this is going to be x0 plus I y0. So that means you found out a point x0 y0 here in this disk at which the minimum value of the function is attained, because mod pz is coming out to be greater than equal to this expression for all z in C. This finishes this lemma. Okay, it completes the proof, I mean to say. So you just simply remember that mod pz attains its minimum value in C. Now let us start with the proof. Proof without using much of complex analysis and much of calculus. So only basic ideas and basic tools. So by lemma, just we ensured that there is a point z0 in C at which this polynomial attains the minimum value. Okay, so let us suppose that the minimum value at this minimum value, the point at which minimum value is attained, pz0 is not equal to 0. So once the minimum value is non-zero, that means this polynomial does not have 0 anywhere, because modulus of pz is going to be greater than equal to mod of pz0. Now in this way we define this g function from C to C by this expression. This is non-zero, so this is well defined. This is a polynomial, so g is also a polynomial, right? So mod gz attains its minimum value at 0 if and only not at 0, because p attains its value at z0 if and only if mod gz attains its value at z equal to 0, right? So see, if z equal to 0, this is pz0 upon pz0. So the minimum value comes out to be at the origin, and the minimum value is always 1. Because see, if you take z equal to 0, this is going to be p of z0 upon p of z0. So this is 1. So you just name this conclusion as A. So the conclusion A is this function g has the minimum value at 0 and the minimum value is going to be 1. Just be with this. You know that gz is a polynomial of degree n. Let us precisely put it as gz equal to bn zn plus bn minus 1 zn minus 1, so on, this thing. Yeah, bk can be anything. It may be 0, but it has to be non-zero at least for one number between 1 and n. So, but certainly if it is a degree of polynomial n, so bn has to be non-zero. So this bn is a complex coefficient. All these are complex coefficients, so I can consider this bk in the polar form as this much. Nothing doing, only just representing the complex number in its polar form. And now this is the point. Z equal to r, this bk I am taking from here, the radius of this, to power minus 1 upon k, e to power I pi minus theta upon k. So I am considering this complex number particularly. Why this complex number? Because this complex number has the beauty that whenever I put bk is equal to this and z is equal to this in the expression for g, here you take all the coefficients and you take the value of z as this one, then we come out with gz to be equal to this much. It is something rk plus 1 into some polynomial in R, so that I denote by hr, right? So where h is a polynomial. So this is simple calculation. So you put the values of bk and zk in your expression for g, you get this expression where h is a polynomial, right? Then for r less than 1, that you apply this modulus of this. So you take this as one term and this as second term, apply the triangle inequality, so this whole thing comes out to be less than or equal to this. Fine. R greater than 0 sufficiently small. Suppose r tends to 0, then this thing has to be less than 1, right? Why? Because this function is continuous and it vanishes at r equal to 0. So that means in the neighborhood of r it has to be very small, so we take it to be less than 1. Thus mod gz is equal to, we are simplifying that expression, that 1 minus rk into 1 minus r into mod hz is going to be less than 1. But remember that this thing is less than 1, so this whole thing is going to be less than 1. R is also less than 1, so this entire expression is going to be less than 1. At this particular z, what is z? Z is this particular z in your domain. So you found out a point in the domain where the function value of gz is going to be less than the minimum value, because 1 is the minimum value, which is at end at 0. So we cannot have any value below that. So therefore this gives us a contradiction. So therefore whatever we assumed in the beginning that p z0 is not equal to 0, we arrive at a contradiction. Therefore this supposition is not correct. So this p z0 should be equal to 0. P z0 equal to 0 means the polynomial p has a 0 at z0. So this is fundamental theorem of algebra. See, do you find any hardcore complex analysis here? I have not used any complex analysis excepting the polar form of your complex number bk as well as z. The only trick is that you consider this precisely, this complex number, and this selection also depends on this expression. Because I have this expression, somehow I have to make this expression to be less than 1. Idea is this, that you just consider, you can find out a point for which the value of modulus, value of the function in its modulus is going to be less than the minimum value, and that yields contradiction, right? So this is the proof that I promised without using hardcore complex analysis. Because once you use the Liouville's theorem or any other big theorem of complex analysis to prove fundamental theorem of algebra, then lot of complex analysis is to be used, which we cannot afford in case of your 11th or 12th class students, right? Because they don't have that big exposure with the complex analysis. That becomes too much. So far we have seen two proofs of this fundamental theorem of algebra. There are many others. This I explained in the beginning as proof number 1. Proof number 2, just that without using complex analysis. And there is another proof by Cauchy's theorem. There is a proof by using Picard's theorem, Cauchy's theorem, maximum modulus theorem, radius of convergence theorem. There are other proofs by using the open mapping theorem, by using your topological concepts. Then there is a proof by using Nevolina value distribution theory. But all those things are going to be hardcore things. And there are many generalizations. There are many generalizations of fundamental theorem of algebra, because we prove it for your entire functions in general. As a particular case, we drive fundamental theorem of algebra out of that. So that is also there. But now see, among all these proofs, I found this proof by Picard's theorem very interesting and very simple, because one can understand. That is the beauty of the proof, because you are using Picard's theorem. No doubt Picard's theorem is a very big and very fundamental result in complex analysis, because the statement is very simple, but the proof is going to be too much hard. So here I will simply recall that what Picard theorem is this. But before that, we have this reference. There is a book by Fine and Rosenberger titled as The Fundamental Theorem of Algebra. This is an undergraduate text published by Springer Verlag in 1997. If you find a chance, just have a look at this book. You will find out variety of proofs of fundamental theorem of algebra. So what is Picard's theorem? Picard theorem is, if you have an entire function f, if it omits two distinct values, I mean to say that if the range of the function does not contain two distinct points, because entire function, its domain is C, its codomain is also C, and if its range omits two values, then that function reduces to a constant. I mean, suppose you have 2 points, z1 and z2 in C, for which you don't have any pre-image under F. In that case, we say that z1 and z2 are omitted values, are the exceptional values, because F is not assuming those values. And Picard theorem says that if that is the case, then that function, that entire function, has to be a constant function. This is Picard theorem. Okay, now by using this, let us prove the fundamental theorem of algebra. What's that? Fundamental theorem of algebra, as you know, that it says that an nth degree polynomial has at least one 0 in C, but n has to be greater than or equal to 1. I mean, non-constant polynomial has a 0 in C. So again, we are supposing on the contrary that Pz does not vanish anywhere in C. That means Pz is not equal to 0 for any z in C. What does it mean? That means 0 is the omitted value of Pz. You know that Pz is an entire function. I have already explained. Pz is an entire function. That means P is a function from C to C. And here it is omitting 0 as per our supposition, because we are assuming this. Pz is not equal to 0. That means one omitted value is 0. So now see what we do. We also prove that Pz does not take on one of the values 1 upon k for k in n. So that means there is also a value of the type 1 upon k where k is in n. That means some kind of rational number. Pz also misses this value. So once I prove this, once I establish this claim that Pz does not assume 1 upon k for some k in n, then Pz will omit two values, 0 and 1 upon k. But remember that Picard's theorem says that as soon as an entire function misses two distinct values, then that function has to be constant. So that means in that case pz will reduce to a constant, which is again a contradiction. Why? Because pz is a polynomial of degree n greater than or equal to 1. That means it is a non-constant polynomial, right? So that means, see how this claim is proved. This is a very simple proof of establishing this claim. Suppose this does not hold. That means pz takes on every such value. It does not omit any value of this type. So it assumes every value. Once it assumes every value, that means for every 1 upon k, there is a point in C such that P of that point is 1 upon k. So that's what I'm saying. There is zk in C such that pzk is equal to 1 upon k. Right? So we know that mod pz is greater than 1 because basically mod pz is tending to infinity. So we can make it bigger than any given number outside a disk of this, because when we take R sufficiently large, this becomes sufficiently large, pz. So I can make it greater than 1. That's clear. Once I take this R sufficiently large, so this becomes a large disk. If it becomes a large disk, then I can house all these points which I am able to find out corresponding to this in this disk. You know that this is a bounded, closed and bounded set. So all points are lying here. That means this is a sequence of points which is lying in the bounded set. So this is a bounded sequence. Therefore, by Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, this converges. In fact, it has a convergent subsequence in other words, but I take this as the subsequence. So zk contains a convergent subsequence, and suppose this convergent subsequence is zkj, which otherwise we would have assumed that zk itself is convergent. So this is convergent. Suppose it converges to some point z prime, because Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem is guaranteeing this, because this is a bounded set, bounded infinite set. So you know that P is a continuous function. So P of this converges to P of this. That means P of z prime is equal to limit j goes to infinity P of this. But P of z kj, here see, P of z kj is 1 upon kj. So 1 upon kj. But you know that this sequence, when j goes to infinity, this is the sequence of natural numbers, it tends to infinity. So this whole thing tends to 0. So that means Pz prime is equal to 0. Pz prime is equal to 0. But this is not allowed as per our supposition, because Pz is never 0. So therefore this is not in reason. Thus, that means there exists k in n such that Pz is not equal to 1 upon k for all z in C. So that means the claim is established. I suppose this is not true, then I get a contradiction. I get a 0 of Pz which is not there because of my supposition. So that means Pz is omitting 0 as well as 1 upon k. So Pz is omitting two values. Therefore we can apply Picard's theorem. Pz is constant, and as I have already explained that this is a contradiction because Pz is a non-constant polynomial. So this is another beautiful proof by using Picard's theorem. Yeah, I can just present these things before you, because you are already well versed with complex analysis. I hope you have done this Picard theorem also during your course of study. It is just simply a question of recalling things which you have done earlier. So there is another important proof. So that is proof of fundamental theorem of algebra by Fourier inversion formula. This was published in American Mathematical Monthly in 2010. This is again very interesting because Fourier inversion formula is this one, that if f is a complex valued continuous function defined on R, if this thing is going to be, or in fact this integral exists, then the Fourier transform defined as this one is continuous. If this thing is if this ft, integral of ft is it also exists, then the inversion formula, because see, out of ft I am extracting fx, the function. Here from function I am going to this Fourier transform, and from here Fourier transform I am extracting the function. So this is the inversion formula, holds everywhere. So this thing holds everywhere. So this is Fourier inversion formula. And as a corollary, we just take that if ft is identically equal to 0, that means if this thing is identically equal to 0, then this f of x is also equal to 0. This follows from this directly, because ft is identically equal to 0, so that means the integral is going to be 0. This is the corollary. In fact, we have to use the corollary only here in the proof. See, the proof is again simple. You suppose the same thing. Suppose pz does not vanish anywhere. I must get a contradiction. If pz does not vanish anywhere, then this 1 upon pz is analytic, because pz is analytic. So this is going to be basically an entire function. Once it is entire, that means it is going to be differentiable for all complex numbers. And differentiable, therefore it is going to be analytic, or you say that holomorphic. So this is holomorphic, or I can say that it is entire function. Let f be the Fourier transform of f on R, right? If t is less than or equal to 0, then we consider the upper half disk. This is the upper half disk. Then by Cauchy's theorem, because this is an analytic function, by Cauchy's theorem, this integral must be equal to 0, right? Expanding the integral gives us two integrals. So that means by this way, you just e to power 2 pi fz. I am considering this integrand. You just take this integrand, and this integrand is coming out to be like this, because modulus of this and modulus of this, it comes out to be 2 pi yt. What is y? Y is the imaginary part of your z, and mod fz. This is going to be less than or equal to this one, because t is less than or equal to 0, therefore this whole thing is going to be less than or equal to 1. But remember that this mod f of z, this Fourier transform, this is of the order of this. That means this remains a bounded quantity when we divide this by this function. So when mod z is arbitrarily large, right? So this is quite simple. I am simply giving you the outline that how fundamental theorem is proved by using Fourier inversion formula. So this is the integrand. That means this thing is of magnitude of this order when mod z is very large. Since length of the semicircle is pi r, because I am using the half circle, upper half circle, upper half disk, in fact half disk. So this integral is big order 1 upon r. Big O 1 upon r means that is a bounded quantity as r tends to infinity. So therefore 0 is equal to this expression minus r to r plus rest, it is going to be of this order on the what you call semicircle. This is along the real line, because you know that your circle is like this and it is like this. So it is minus r to r, and then the integral is like this. So therefore I have to divide the given integral into two parts along the boundary. One is along the real line segment minus r to r, and another is along the semicircle. But along the semicircle, this integral is of this order. So fine. So when r tends to infinity, this thing becomes 0, and this thing is nothing but when r tends to infinity, this is the Fourier transform. So that means ft is equal to 0. So ft equal to 0 for t less than or equal to 0. So similarly, we can handle the same case. We handle the case t greater than or equal to 0 similarly by using the same technique. I will be taking t greater than or equal to 0, and then this kind of calculation will again yield that this is going to be 0. That means in the upper half disk as well as in the lower half disk, this thing is going to be 0. That means in the entire disk, this thing is equal to 0. Thus ft is equal to 0, which contradicts the corollary. right? Because see, this is the corollary. Ft is identical equal to 0 implies fx equal to 0. So when fx is not equal to 0, then this has to be non-zero by contrapositive. So that means the Fourier inversion formula also yields the proof of fundamental theorem of algebra. So this is what I can talk about fundamental theorem of algebra up till now. But still, in my third lecture, because I am given half an hour for each lecture, so within half an hour, whatever I can cover, so I am presenting that before you. But in my next lecture, that will be in continuation, I will be using fundamental theorem of algebra by using Cauchy theorem only Cauchy theorem, because I use the Cauchy theorem in the last proof also. See here, I am using the Cauchy theorem, but I am using something more, that is Fourier inversion formula. But in the next proof that I will be presenting, I will be using only this Cauchy theorem, no inversion formula. So that I keep for the next lecture. I have many more things to tell about this, because there are certain generalizations and very interesting generalizations. But see, the purpose of talking about this fundamental theorem of algebra in all the three lectures is that you come across variety of proofs of this by using different techniques. And in third lecture, you will come across some generalizations, some general results about entire functions, zeros of entire functions, and from where I can drive this fundamental theorem of algebra as a particular case. So yeah, as per the time limit, I must stop here. So thank you very much. We shall again meet in the next lecture, that is lecture number 3. Okay, thank you. God bless. I will be giving you my email address in my last lecture. So if you have any doubts, you have any queries, questions, or confusions about any of the steps in the proofs, you can write to me, and I will be happy to respond to your queries. So thank you very much for today.